Good evening. This is the Tuesday, September 8th meeting of the Human Services Committee. We are called to order. First item of business is our approval of the meeting minutes from May 4th, a long time ago.
Move approval. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Items for consideration. First are police complaints. Is Commander Davis here? Oh, I'm sorry. Commander Davis, if you don't mind, we'll do citizen comments first. It's been a while since I chaired a committee, so excuse my lapse. We have two on our list for tonight. Welcome, and thank you for coming. Nancy Schwartz, please join us at the podium. Introduce yourself.
Hi.
Good evening.
I'm Nancy Schwartz, and I'm a homeowner on Hull Terrace, and my family has happily lived in this building since 1970. Yes.
Excuse me, would you move the microphone so that we can all hear you?
Is that better?
And don't be scared.
Is it too much?
It's just fine, thank you.
Okay. I have lupus, an autoimmune illness, and am highly allergic to bee stings. Why is this important? My next-door neighbor has installed a beehive in his backyard. It was done without my having any prior knowledge that this was happening. With properties being so close to each other, his yard is essentially my yard, only separated by a fence. There is very little distance from the beehive to my yard, spitting distance, as they say. As the beehive was being installed, I expressed my shock, dismay, and alarm, explaining my severe life-threatening allergic reaction to a bee sting. I explained my previous reactions to being stung and having become seriously ill. I was assured by my neighbor that his bees would not be coming into my yard. I was assured that in the unlikely event that they did, he promised that they would not bother me, being very busy pollinating. Well, his bees do come into my yard and get a daily drink from our bird bath. After all, there are no barriers between our properties, and his yard is my yard in this urban area. We tried many conversations and even a mediation attempt, but to no avail. I even suggested working with the Ecology Center, possibly starting a program to educate the community about bees, etc., but to no avail. He is adamant in his stance to have a beehive in his yard for his garden and to help the ecological balance of nature. I do understand and I do agree with the need for the ecological balance, but just not with the beehive literally in my backyard. He is in compliance with the code, but at what price? The result of the mediation attempt was the suggestion that when going into my backyard, I should wear a bee suit, hat, mesh, netting, long gloves, etc. The second suggestion was that I just go into my backyard after dusk. Really? I have not been in my yard since June, when the beehive was installed. Having lupus increases the severity of the allergic reaction, increases the threat of anaphylactic shock, seizures, and death. This is a medical issue, a life and death concern. As I have learned from the doctor and pharmacist when I got my EpiPen, once you have been stung, each subsequent sting becomes increasingly more dangerous since the bee venom remains in your body and builds up in intensity with future stings. Lupus also heightens and increases the severity of the allergic reaction, and then it becomes simply a life and death concern. The next time could be fatal. An EpiPen is only a momentary attempt to forestall the impending onset of anaphylactic shock and possible death. Seconds count, and for me, 911 must be called immediately. Yes, there are birds, butterflies, bees in all of our yards, but a beehive next to my yard is tempting fate, increasing the possibility and likelihood of something happening. There are 20 to 80,000 bees in a hive. 20 to 80,000 bees in a hive. You cannot control their flight, and it only takes one bee, one sting. I have lost the use of my backyard due to extreme anxiety and concern of a fatal consequence, or at the very least, severe illness. It has been brought to my attention in talking with property tax representatives that the beehive in my neighbor's yard could devalue my property and make it far more difficult to sell due to concerns for safety. Quite frankly, I am shocked and appalled that the Evanston Code allows beehives when properties are in such close proximity. I'm asking for the code to be changed. It should be required when considering the installation of a beehive that all immediate neighbors on all sides be informed and a signature required. If someone is opposed, the acceptance is thus not unanimous and should be addressed. This is a medical issue, life and death, and not to be entered into without full consent of all neighbors. There should be a minimum number of feet required from one yard to another where the beehive would be located to assure that there is no threat to anyone, and especially anyone with an allergic reaction. There should be no reason for a property owner not to be able to enjoy the use of his property. Thank you for listening to me.
Excuse me. I'm sorry, I did editor the list. Two more speakers. Ms. Thompson, excuse me.
I'm actually speaking later on the program, so.
We're glad to have you here. Great. Mrs. Ducree, would you like to speak?
Yes.
I noticed you came late, and I've added your name to our list of speakers.
Madeline Ducree. How's everyone? Thank you. I just want to make a comment on the person that just mentioned something about bees. Yes. There's bees located in and I forgot to call them alderman, right behind my house, and they're just swarming. It's on private property, but they're swarming. I don't know if this is like a takeover with the skunks or raccoons or what, but the bees are here now. So, and they're deadly, believe me. My son had a reaction to wasps and then bees, and he just, if he didn't get, anyway, it's dangerous. But anyway, I wanted to come up and make this comment, Russian, that on August 31st of last month, I spoke at the City Council meeting to make comment about the Cook County Sheriff Department when they came into my town, our town, and displayed such a foul, unprofessional behavior to a young man by stopping him, frisking him, and searching him in public view, and violated this young man's rights. In my opinion, I still say it was molestation. I ask that the Human Services Committee check on this, okay? I can write my letters to the Sheriff's Department, but this is the Human Services Committee, and you all need to check it out, because it's violating somebody's rights. Human, okay? Human rights is being violated here. Now, let me just say this, and I'm gonna put this paper aside. If I also heard that some people were arrested, stopped, frisked, whatever, and they had drugs on them or guns. If it was unlawful and it had probable cause, law enforcement, do what you have to do, okay? I have no problem with that. But when something is unfair, when our rights are violated, because it can be any one of you and your children, all right? Not right. And we need to check it. Now, is there a policeman being shot? And I agree with that? Heck no. Half black, half white, so I understand. I don't give a heck what color they are. It is wrong. But we have to watch. We have to change the policies of the police department in order to be fair here, okay? Change the policy. I don't know who they think or anyone think that anything's going to get done without going up and changing the policy. Lawmakers, we have to call our legislators and see that something is done to change those laws so that we can start getting on about the business. Some of these children are out here, and I know doggone well some of them rights have been violated. Now, this kind of stuff with a young person being violated, touching all kind, that's not helping us. That's not helping us. It is not. Think about it. If you're the mother, heck with the mother. If you're a parent, the father, and you learn something like this, and if I'm wrong, I'll come back up here and apologize, okay? I don't think so. And another thing I would like to touch on, and I'm running out of time, so I'll do the rest of it later. I want to comment on Donald Trump. Guess what? I agree with Donald Trump to a certain extent with certain things he's saying. I'm not a Republican, but who knows? I might change down the line somewhere if the man has something to offer, okay? Or anyone. And I don't want to talk politics around here, but nobody's going to put me in a box, whether it's Democrat or Republican. But if the man is on to something, I might think. But another thing which I have to say before I leave this podium, it reminds me of, you can take it either way. Because years ago, and I mean years ago, the KKK came about on this kind of rhetoric, okay? And it went the wrong way. So let's pay attention to that, because there's too many people are following this man, maybe for the wrong reason. And I'll speak some more about that throughout. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other speakers for the Human Services Committee tonight? All right. Thank you, ladies, very much. Next is Police Complaints Review, Commander Davis. Were there any comments or observations or insights about the packets materials? Any questions?
I'd like to get a little. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just
Right there.
background on, it was the 4 officers and the 2 juveniles pulled over.
Yes.
That's what I'm looking for right now, Alderman Holmes.
CR 1409, maybe?
Probably.
CR 1409.
Yeah. Let's talk about that.
Yes, sir.
Just a little bit of background. I mean, I read through it. Obviously, a lot of information goes through the committee. Just share the background if you can.
2 people stopped on a bike for not having lights, not having their bikes properly illuminated.
Mm-hmm.
They were stopped. The police encountered them, asked them regular questions, one of which, why are you out so late? Because I think one was, in fact, a juvenile. And I do know that you have a list of things that were said during that stop.
Yeah, very detailed.
And I'm kind of glad you went in this direction, because this was something I wanted to bring up tonight. We're being bombarded with a lot of complaints that simply they're simply false. They're not a variation of the truth. They're simply false. This complaint, as well as some of the others, and even the most recent one, which is kind of in the news and made a big appearance with Evanston, with one of our new establishments in the city of Evanston. The bottom line is, the things that were mentioned in this complaint that the youth said happened, they simply did not happen. So I'm glad you brought this up, because I just wanted the council to be aware that we are being bombarded with a lot of complaints that simply are not true. Now, we do take these complaints seriously. We don't just brush them off, which is why they appear before you, as well as the other 3 committees that review these complaints. The complaints are still investigated, still taken seriously, and just proven to be false. This falls into that category of what the young gentleman alleged. This was one of those things that had no reason to go in the direction that it went into. This was a simple stop at night. Hey, guys, you don't have any lights on your bikes? Simple questions. Who are you? Why are you in the area? Is this your bike? One complied. As you see, that one was released at the scene. The other one took it in a totally different direction, and it was subsequently brought in. His grandmother had to pick him up. But all of the list of allegations that you have in your packet there, that he alleged this happened, simply did not happen.
Thank you, Commander.
Alderman Holmes?
Commander, when you say it simply did not happen, what is our proof that it did not happen? Were these videotaped?
These
Or are these just word of mouth that?
These were not videotaped, and you're right. This is just word of mouth. The officer's response, as compared to what the youth said happened. But as we look at we take what we have to investigate the incident. How long were the officers on the stop? Who else responded? We'll get the response from any witnesses. The other youth that was brought in as well. Everyone was spoken to find out if any of this did in fact occur. So we did not just take the officer's response. We also interviewed the young kid, the one that was released at the scene, and that's when we came to the conclusion that this just did not happen the way the young man said that it happened.
And the reason why I asked that, because I think one of them also, I can't remember which number, had an example where the officer's mic wasn't working, and he borrowed another one when the other officer drove up, which to me is just really good common sense, because if we have these cameras in the cars, why are we not using them so that then we wouldn't have to worry about a word of mouth, because we have the proof. I mean, you can show what happened and what didn't happen. So are we just sort of still a little bit behind in our training, or what do you think?
I wouldn't even say that. The one that the alderman is referring to is DI 1506. DI 1506, and that one involved an elderly lady who, when she made the complaint, this was maybe 3 weeks later, and I guess it had time to fester, and she was really upset because she was going to miss a doctor's appointment,
right.
Which is why my first order of business was, let me just reschedule your court appointment, so now that's not something you need to worry about. But she was totally frustrated, and I spent a lot of time talking to her myself. However, when I viewed the video and seeing what exactly happened, and the officer went to great lengths to make sure, let me get this videotape, let me get another officer with a microphone. He went to great lengths to make sure that this encounter was videotaped. But at the end of the day, she was frustrated and in the heat of the moment, and she called our office with a line of things that had occurred. However, when I was able to view the video, talk to the officer, and even after she had calmed down a little bit later, everything that she had told me initially wasn't exactly
The way it was, right.
You know, it wasn't as she had explained it initially.
Right, and that's my whole point in terms of this, because I know there are a lot of complaints. I get calls all the time, and go ahead and complain if you want to complain. But I really am, it works two ways now. Of course, the people who making the complaint then have to rethink and relook at where they are. So it just puzzles me as to why we're not using the technology that we do have. And I know that every car doesn't have it. I understand that. But in this season, not just in Evanston, but in our country, where there are so many allegations that a good offense is better than a bad defense. So I'm just wondering if we
are using our equipment, and we rely on it heavily because we don't want to find ourselves on Fox News or in any compromising circumstances. So we do use our equipment when feasibly, when it's possible, and we have it available to us. I think what we're witnessing now is just the community's, I don't want to call it heightened awareness, but their heightened frustration with law enforcement in general, and they perceive every encounter to be an encounter where they need to immediately jump to the defense. And that does escalate a situation to a point that it just does not need to go. When they come in to complain, I would like to think that they're not blatantly lying. Maybe that's the way they perceived the encounter at that time. But when I'm able to show them that it just simply didn't go that way, that never happened, they sometimes will just apologize and go away, or they'll just hold their stance and just leave the office, still frustrated. But that's beginning to happen on a greater scale now, where we're getting complaints where people are just blatantly not telling the truth, or they're just come to the party defensively.
Right.
You have another one in your packet about the police officer being parked in her driveway as he's responding to a call. And there's always a backstory. I won't give the address, but this council is aware that that particular street near the lakefront that has the angled parking, there's, need I go on? There's nowhere for you to park. And if we're responding to a call, we may find ourselves in someone's driveway. We have two things going on in that particular area, not only the parking, but the incident that we were responding to, which is the illegal activity that goes on in that area. So we're responding to that area, responding to a complaint that's ongoing, and when we get there, someone complains about us parking in their driveway, gets into a full confrontation with the police. They just came to the party defensively. You would think you'd be delighted to see the police officer in your area, especially when you have an ongoing problem, but that just doesn't seem to be the case anymore. I just want to make sure that this council is aware. When you see these complaints, we investigate everything thoroughly. Our response is quick. And if there's any wrongdoing, we get on it immediately.
Absolutely.
And as always, whenever I have your attention, we've got, 3 or 4 complaints in here, and I've got about 35 letters of appreciation
absolutely.
and commendation.
Thank you.
So Commander Davis, I got to ask then, it's pretty obvious to all of us that our police department takes every complaint very seriously and investigates everyone with real sincerity. Do you ever, are our residents, the complainants, our residents, ever surprised at the matter-of-fact way in which you handle their complaints and the sincerity with which you pursue them and investigate them?
I think they're surprised. They come in, sometimes the incident happens at night, and they're on 10 and they talk to the night supervisor. I think they're surprised when, okay, yep, your complaint is followed up. I am going to be calling you in the morning twice. I'm going to call you at work. I'm going to keep calling you until I get in touch with you. So I think they are surprised that they do receive such a prompt response.
And it also seems pretty clear from the big stack of commendations and compliments in today's packet that you have a full-service police department. You know, the kind of services that our police officers are performing go well beyond anything that I think most residents imagine. The kind of things that you're getting thanked for.
I know.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, you probably don't even realize some of the things we do that you wouldn't even think a police department would be involved in this type of activity. But Evanston in general is good with that type of stuff. When it comes to services to the community, outreach projects to the community, we're rich in that area, and people probably have no idea that we even involve ourselves with coffee with a cop or something like that.
A lot of kindness and compassion come out in some of these complaints. Yeah.
That, it has to be noted that this comes from a lot of hard work. This has not been easy. It wasn't always like this,
Right.
but it has improved over the years. It has really improved, and it's been a lot of hard work by the chief and the staff, and
We have a very
proud
good
of it.
police
Yeah.
department.
So thanks for the good
I do
direction.
have one quick follow-up question. Commander,
Braithwaite.
thank you, Madam Chair. How do we follow up with the residents to let them know that their specific case is going to be in front of us this evening? Are you responsible for notifying residents?
We don't always, just like you mentioned that we haven't met for 3 or 4 months or since the last time we met was met, we don't always know when we're going to meet. However, when I have a particular complaint, I do try to let them know, hey, you're up this weekend or you're up next week. I would always tell them, check the website so you'll know, because they do know their case number, the DI, the CR, so it's included in the packet that's on the website. So if they check the website, they can look and see where their number falls. However, when there's something particular that I know someone wants to be here to hear about, I keep in touch with them because they're continually calling me. Am I up? Am I up? So when we meet regularly, like as scheduled, like tonight, we're here at 6 instead of 7. So it's kind of hard to tell them, come at this time, this is when your case is up. But they are always advised to review the website because they are aware of what their number is.
Okay.
All right, anything else? Yes, Alderman Miller.
Commander, real quick, do you have statistics for how many stops or how many citations we're issuing for cyclists failing to have a light?
No, I do not. Don't ever
general
ask me
idea?
for stats when I come up here. That's something I would have to get in advance. So no, I don't come to this meeting with any stats like that. But it is
general
available.
idea of
Would not even have a general idea. But
could you get those for us?
oh yeah,
Okay.
stats on everything we do is available.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's handled through our records division. Okay.
I don't know if, thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know if Mr. Creed left, but she did ask a question regarding.
here.
She is here? Is it possible to follow up at our next Human Services meeting with the statistics from the Cook County Sheriff's last visit to our town?
We did have a,
Did- I
we had a
think-
meeting, we had a meeting with the chief
Right.
on that. Now, there hasn't been a follow-up meeting since then, but the committee or the group of people that met with the chief, Commander Davis was there as well, and gave them, if I remember correctly, theirs is a border review, right?
Yeah.
And where we could complain directly to the sheriff's
Right.
committee for complaints there.
So did they give you figures, how many stops, what they recovered, any drug arrests? That was the question that I heard her ask, so I don't know if she was at that meeting.
Yeah, she wasn't. She called the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Did she receive the information?
She didn't request that. That's not the information we requested. We
Right.
requested what she talked about tonight, which was the stop of the young man.
Crystal clear, but
Okay.
this evening I heard her ask for the statistics of the,
I can respond to your question, Alderman, because,
Thank
and
you.
I'm kind of proud to respond because we got some very good stats from that.
Okay.
I
Thank
don't
you.
have them with me, but yes, we can have those available to you for the next Human Service Committee.
thank
They
you so
came out
much.
already.
Those are very advantageous and
Chief sent them out once to
Okay.
us.
Thank you, Commander Davis. Next on the agenda, I'll move Resolution 89R15, authorizing the city manager to enter into an 8-month lease agreement for the Noyes Street Theater at the Noyes Cultural Arts Center. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next item is our 2015 Emergency Solutions Grant allocations. I'll move approval.
Second.
Any discussion? We have staff here to discuss and explain. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Moving along. An update recommending acceptance of the handyman program report. I'll move acceptance of the report, but I think there is a report. Yes. All right. We have Ms. Thompson here. A live report. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Last time I came, I actually sat in the audience because I believe you all wanted a report when you all noticed that the fund was moving from one category to the affordable housing. So I had spoken with a couple of aldermen regarding that, and I wanted to come tonight and just give a report on the handyman so you know where we stand. So right now we have over 1,500 seniors who are eligible for the handyman program. So I actually looked at the statistics for those of you all who are here tonight, and your wards really represent the largest numbers, other than Alderman Rainey. So, Braithwaite, you have 262. And then Alderman Holmes, you have 326. Alderman Miller, you have 173. So yours are very high numbers, and we want to make sure that we are able to serve each of our seniors in the most effective and appropriate way. So for the last year, we have really looked at the handyman program and all of the requests that have been made. And we want to be really transparent. So I have completed a letter to go out to everyone who is eligible so they know exactly what is covered. So they don't have to guess. They don't have to call for really an assessment to say, oh, I think that's covered, maybe that's not. So they know exactly what's covered. Looking over the past year, we do notice that we have some seniors who use the program over and over and over and over again. And then there are others who use it once or twice. So what we're worried about is that, at some point we could run out of money for the person who's used it 19 times in a year and the person who's only used it once. So we've had to look at the program and put some parameters around how many times they can use the program. So we've capped it at, starting October 1st, $250 per year. And what we've done to make sure it's fair is that we've looked at what requests have been made and what the average is for those requests. We've also had to look at individuals who have a two-story home but want the gutters on the second floor cleaned. And we've had to say, we can only clean the gutters for one-story homes. So those types of issues are addressed in the letter. And of course, they can always contact us. It tells them step by step how to put in a request. And we've actually looked at what our former policies and procedures are, and that's why we've been able to really kind of look at it and see where we need to move forward. Just to give you how many, we've had 107 requests that we've completed since January. So we don't have a waiting list anymore. A senior, and that's, a double-edged sword. And I mean that because sometimes Sam will go out, and Sam is our handyman, Sam Goss. He'll go out in a couple of days. So then they kind of get into the notion that, hey, when I call, he'll be out tomorrow, the next day. So at one point, we did have a 6 to 8 week waiting list. And so we always tell them that it should never be longer than 2 weeks. And if there's ever a lapse that they need to call me immediately, I always call Sam and he goes out immediately. So we don't have the waiting list that we had a couple of years ago.
I have to say I'm amazed when you said that there are people who use it maybe 19 times, but how would you use it like that? I mean, what would you use it in your home? I'm just trying to think in my head.
I have a list.
In terms of a handyman.
It could be lint trap, tub drain, replace furnace filter, kitchen faucet, repair.
So they call you for anything and everything.
Right. And so that's why we've had to really look and prioritize and say these are the top, and we really want to do repairs that keep a senior in their homes longer, and not just, light bulbs, something that maybe a senior could get the neighbor
to do
or a church member or someone. We want to really go out and make sure that we're able to do repairs that, are functional, that make them, able to stay in their home longer. And so we're looking at all of these, and we've really just said, let's see what happens for a year. And that's why we've looked at that. I had an intern last year who actually called handyman. We did a survey, and he called seniors. And you'd be surprised that even though they have, a senior who's used it 19 times, there are still items on the list now that are not on the list now that they want. They want, someone to hang blinds and, someone to paint. And really, we're having to limit it to, repairs instead of those things that are more cosmetic.
Well, so for instance, say if you have a senior who had a tub drain and maybe a drippy faucet and maybe one other thing, that the handyman could do that in one thing.
Absolutely.
That wouldn't be 3 different things,
no, ma'am.
Right? Okay.
And that's what, and again, initially, a few years ago, that could be 3 different visits.
Okay.
What's really good about Sam is if he's there for 15 minutes, he charges for 15 minutes. And many of the contracts that we looked at before, the proposals, it was 2-hour minimum. And it wasn't the price that he charges. He's only charging us $30 an hour. And so that's really, really low for a handyman. So if he's there 30 minutes, it's $15, and that's it.
Okay.
Alderman Braithwaite?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for providing us with a report, Ms. Thompson. So quick question just for our community that's watching. How does a senior make a request to the handyman program?
They can call 311, or they can call the Levy Center, and then we'll do an assessment over the phone. So we'll just take their information if they're not on the Evanston benefit card, because it is a part of the Evanston benefit card. Then we sign them up, which means they are privileged to all of the other benefits of the Evanston benefit card, because if you qualify for the handyman program, you qualify for everything else. So they could call us. We're there 8:30 to 5, Monday through Friday, to do an application, and it's pretty simple as that.
And you can do it over a phone?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
So they call over the phone, we put in the request, and then Sam calls and schedules a mutually convenient time for him and the senior. So we don't actually make the call to schedule, because we don't want to be the middle person. We want them to be able to talk directly to the handyman. And they have his cell phone number, so they call him as
Sure,
well.
he loves that. We have one more question,
Sure.
Ms. Thompson. Alderman Tendem? Did you?
I think you actually answered my question, but it was regarding, when you said the new limit would be $250 at $30 an hour, so that's roughly 8 hours of work.
Right.
But the fact that you can break it into smaller increments, I think, makes it more, certainly goes a longer way for people who don't have large jobs all at once. So.
Absolutely. And when you're looking at a gutter cleaning, there are no supplies associated with that, just his time. So, he's really fair. I have to say that. And I look at all the reports. The problem is sometimes it gets to be more money, because once you get into a job, maybe you don't know. And we don't want to leave a person's, faucet or something exposed, so we complete the job. So we haven't held to the guideline because they don't have a letter, and we feel it's fair for them to understand, be able to call us with questions before we actually put this into effect. So we don't want to talk to them about limits when they don't know that there are limits. So that's why we want to follow up by providing a letter.
All right. One more question.
Sure.
Alderman Braithwaite.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's more a comment, since we have Sarah Flax in the audience, that for situations that are, and I don't know the range, Sarah, when does the home rehab loan program kick in?
Well, I think
for
I
our
can
seniors?
also answer that.
Oh, you do?
Sarah and
Okay.
I work
Okay.
very closely together with Christine Rennert. And when there are individuals who have larger rehab projects, we really send them to Christine, who will help them complete an application. We also now have Indira and Bree especially, who will help. They've even been out to home visits. Christine Rennert is a notary, so we've done power of attorney paperwork on site so that an individual could sign documents for one of the relatives. So we really work hand in hand. So I'm sorry I took your fire. So.
No, that's quite all right. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. There's no absolute dollar limit for CDBG housing rehab. However, due to the requirements that HUD keeps adding on, the environmental reviews and all those sorts of things, if it's under about $5,000, it just generally isn't something that is very effective to be done. But most of the time, we don't have a whole lot of problems. Most of them are well over that. Now, there can be exceptions. Obviously, emergency things like a furnace replacement or something like that might be much less. But, we do have, I think most of our rehabs are now at least $5,000 and can go up to $50,000 per for a single family house.
That's great.
It's great. Thank you.
Anything else? It's been moved and seconded to accept the report with enthusiasm. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Great. Thank you, Ms. Thompson, and thank you, Ms. Flax. Last item on our agenda for discussion is the city employee drug testing policy. We got at the meeting tonight a memo from Deputy City Manager Erica Storley and our Human Resources Division Manager Jennifer Lynn. Welcome. With additional information as a follow-up, I'm guessing, to a previous inquiry about our drug testing policy.
Good evening, Madam Chair.
Welcome.
I just wanted to go over the drug testing policy. So I think in your packets you have both the memo and then you actually have the pertinent section of the personnel manual that actually talks about the drug and alcohol testing policy. So if you want to just look at those really quickly. So basically, we have 4 reasons for testing: pre-employment, returns to work, promotions, transfers, voluntary reduction, and then reasonable suspicion. So I think most importantly, let's talk about the reasonable suspicion category. So there are 3 categories within the reasonable suspicion category. So obviously, after an accident or an injury, there can be a drug and alcohol test that's ordered by the supervisor. Another category would be for performance. So if somebody is walking around, acting funny, speaking funny, the supervisor can also order a drug test as well. And then a third-party report is a separate category under reasonable suspicion. So let's say you've got a John Doe public citizen sees an employee and sees something that might make him wonder if this is a person that might be under the influence. They can obviously also call in to request a drug test as well. So those are the 3 categories that make up reasonable suspicion. So if you wanted to ask any questions specifically about reasonable suspicion, feel free to do that. And then we've got some consequences of positive tests for employees. So obviously if you have, depending on if you're in a safety sensitive position, you've got some consequences for testing positive for drug and alcohol testing as well. So sometimes you might be terminated right away depending on your situation or depending on the circumstances. Other times you might be recommended to undergo an evaluation and to complete an EAP process where you might have to go into a rehab facility or a rehab program and then be subject to random urine drops and then to complete that evaluation as well.
And then the end of the memo, excuse me, Director Lynn, the end of the memo is changes under consideration. Can you walk us through that?
Absolutely. So some current weaknesses are that the post-accident, post-injury testing is now discretionary. So it's really going to be incumbent upon the supervisor to notify the department head or HR to recommend drug testing, and that really isn't being done very uniformly and very consistently. So one of the recommendations that I would make is that accident testing becomes mandatory. So post any accident, post any injury, a drug and alcohol test would be ordered. That seems to be the trend that's happening with a lot of municipalities. So just to give you some name a few: Bensonville, Geneva, Round Lake Beach, Matson, Huntley, Skokie, Niles, Highland Park, Mount Prospect. Those are all some of the municipalities that are requiring post-accident testing as opposed to a discretionary situation. So I think that those would be very good steps to take for Evanston. They would obviously deter the effect of drug and alcohol use, increased caution while operating city vehicles, accountability, risk management, and most of all, compliance with the Federal Drug-Free Workplace Act for federal grant. And then just to give you some numbers, I think numbers are always great. You've asked for a lot of numbers tonight. So in 2014, we had 98 accidents. 70 of them involved other vehicles, parked or otherwise. And then just this year alone, from 2015 to July, 59 accidents, and 37 of those involving other vehicles. So as you can see, a lot of accidents are taking place by city employees, whether it's a accident or whether it's a purposeful thing or whether it's just negligence or maybe irresponsible behavior. I think that those would all be really great instances of post-accident testing being required and mandated by the city.
The newest trend is not to call them accidents, rather call everything a crash, because nothing's really an accident.
I like the word incident.
Incident.
It could be an incident, so it's an accident or a situation involving an injury or just a piece of equipment. I like the word incident. I think that's a really good broad word.
Alderman Holmes has a question. Sure.
A question and a comment. I think that that's excellent. I think that after any incident, there ought to be. My question really goes back to third-party reports. I just want to be real clear on how that would work. Suppose I saw Erica walking down the hall. She stumbles over something, and I report that. Does she have to go in for drug testing?
Make sure to report that to me because I will definitely follow up. I think what's great about the third-party reports is it does require independent corroboration. So if a third-party report came into HR, for instance, I would actually send one of my staff, or I would actually go and actually talk to that person. So if in that situation you'd call me up and say, I saw Erica and she was acting crazy on the street, I would actually go seek her out, talk to her, look at her, and make a determination as best as I can, or maybe have a police officer come out to maybe just look at her and to see if there are any other sorts of evidence or indicia of influence before I would recommend a drug test. I would not simply just take your word for it. I would definitely corroborate it, given that it's a third-party report, and I don't necessarily.
So that kind of follow-up is done on every third-party report?
Absolutely, and we actually don't have any. I have no evidence or history of third-party reports. I know that this is in here specifically as part of the policy, so I think that in a situation where there might be a third-party report, there would definitely be some independent corroboration that would be required.
Okay.
All right, Alderman Miller?
But in terms of the performance behavior reasonable suspicion category, is there any independent corroboration there?
There would be independent corroboration if practical. So obviously if it was out on the scene, out in the field, and there was a supervisor that had observed an employee acting strangely, there would need to be some evidence of influence or evidence of odd behavior. That supervisor would be required to talk to the department head about it. And again, if practical, there would be a secondary corroborating person that would come and say, you know what, I'm looking at you and I agree, and then mandate the drug test.
And so is this all documented too, that all the supervisor's report, call it the bureau head's report as well, this would all be documented, and why there's no corroboration or what was impractical in that sense?
It is supposed to be documented, whether it's an email or whether it's a memo. I would believe that if the evidence did not support that, so let's say the department head actually got the information, then spoke to that employee and didn't necessarily agree with the supervisor that had seen the original evidence of possible influence, I would think that the department head would also follow up with HR and say, you know what, I disagree with the supervisor's decision, or I disagree with the supervisor's observations.
So I haven't looked at this whole thing. I've looked at the proposed changes in a sense. Is there any provision in here for documentation of any reasonable suspicion in that sense?
Not specifically. It just says, it does say that the observations must be documented. It doesn't say in what type of form or what type of format. It does say that the observations must be documented.
Could you clarify that? And not saying now, I'm saying in the policy as well, like what supervisors are supposed to do with documentation, et cetera, if there's any reasonable suspicion. I mean, third party, it sounds like there's no history of that, but if we have supervisors doing it, I'd like to see more documentation.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, this is an ongoing policy evaluation that we've been working closely with the union and the employees to make sure that we're doing everything possible to ensure that the safety of the residents and the employees is met to the fullest extent. So a couple of the suggestions that came out of our meetings with the unions and the employees was some concern over the idea that we have this, if practical. It's not always practical, and in order to ensure safety and make sure that we can cover what needs to be covered, sometimes it's not practical. But in those instances, we make every effort to ensure that it is. And there will be some additional enhancements made to the policy out of these meetings, but we're not completed with that process yet. And there's also going to be some additional training. So this fall, we're going to meet with all supervisors, go through the entire policy, make sure that everybody understands it, have everybody sign off on the policy, that they've read it, understand it, and know how to act on it. And then we'll be doing refresher trainings on an annual basis forthcoming.
I'd like to see a specific set process for documentation of any allegation or reasonable suspicion in that sense. I understand that if actual testing isn't practical, it's even more important in those cases that we document the allegations against our employees in this regard. So if we could somehow flesh that out in here further, just the documentation procedures or set policy, department policy and procedures for that, I'd love to see that. Thanks.
Okay. Alderman Braithwaite?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just as a follow-up to Alderman Miller, will staff receive any training to be able to define that suspicious behavior? That makes me a little bit nervous, and I understand if you have a police officer that to some degree may extend, but who in our staff will be trained to be able to do that?
Any supervisors that would mandate a drug test. So any supervisors that would actually be in the field that would observe a person under the influence would be trained on the policy, and any other people that would be making those decisions. Not necessarily coworkers, but definitely field supervisors, crew leaders, anybody that might be supervising a crew or have some direct observation of crew people that are working on the fields. And then I think that's a great idea to bring in, we've got a lot of great DUI officers, so they would be able to actually help us identify and show us and even demonstrate certain things that we might be looking for, because I think a lot of the times we all have some layman ideas of what being under the influence is, but to have some experts come out and really train us on how to make those observations would be really helpful.
You've got my point. Thank you.
Alderman Miller?
You'll be bringing this back to us at some point as it's fleshed out with the unions and everything of that sort?
Absolutely.
Okay, great, thanks.
I think with the understanding that this is a departmental policy change that doesn't require City Council approval, but obviously information to City Council. The points are to eliminate subjectivity. Looks like
Yeah.
we'd like you to go down that road for what it's worth, knowing that we're not approving this policy. Changing accident to incident, and then clarifying the documentation for reasonable suspicion. And then think about defining the word practical. You might mean actually the word practicable, that is capable of being done in the moment. Is it actually possible to do the deed? So that's practicable, not practical in the discussions. Anything else?
I agree.
It's a lawyer word.
Yeah. Mr. Ford's going to back me up on that one. Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Thank you, Director Lynn.
Thank
Really nice
you.
to have
Good
you here,
evening.
committee, and thank you, Ms. Storley. I believe, unless there's anything else, that our meeting, Alderman Holmes.
Could we please review the policy on beehives? I thought that there was something in there about contacting neighbors. This happened so long ago that I don't remember, but I'd like for us to look at that again, because I think that it seemed like to me we had a discussion like this when we were looking at establishing beehives.
I think the ordinance to allow apiaries, the beehives, preceded me on the City Council.
It did.
We did address backyard hens. So the chicken coops, and that was another.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
Long conversation.
And roosters, so. Yeah, but if we could look at that again, because I think that that is something that we should look at again, and because I think neighbors do have rights.
Right. Are you looking for a memo in the next packet for the committee
Maybe
so that we can review, study it, and see if there are next steps?
That would be
let's
helpful.
Just do that. Maybe
Yes.
just for just additional packet material for our next meeting. All right. Great. Thank you. Anything else? Alderman Tennant?
I took a quick look at the code. I didn't see anything, although I thought, too, that there was something in there with regard to safety of neighbors, especially with, and I know that this subject came up when we talked about fire pits with regard to neighbors who may suffer from asthma or things like that. And I don't think in that case either that we were specific about what the neighbors' rights are, but I think there was some wording about using best judgment or something, or work with the neighbors. But it may be that we have to go further with the beehives. I don't know. It certainly is a serious concern for those, and there are a lot of folks who are severely allergic to bee stings.
But if nothing else, I think notification is so important, and that they may not be able to stop it. I'm not saying that, but notification, which is just a common courtesy, and we may have just assumed that people would do that. I'm not sure. I don't remember. I just remember the incidents, but I don't remember all the conversation. But if we could review it, it would be great.
Sure. Staff memo with a summary of
Absolutely.
our ordinances. All right. Thank you. Anything else? All right. I declare us adjourned unless there's a motion to adjourn.
Fantastic.
Second. And there are no other meetings in this chamber tonight.